Good morning to everyone.
Morning.
As most of you know, we are currently in the process of elaborating on the 6 sources that we draw from as Unitarian Universalists. This week, Reverend Nick will speak to the 5th source, which is described as follows: humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And I must say, when the assignments were made for worship associates, I was very pleased to be assigned to this service, because I believe very strongly in the importance of reason and science in guiding us. However, there are some limitations, and I'm going to get into maybe a couple of that I've experienced over the years. But for as long as I can remember, and certainly for those people who know me, I could be fairly described as a straight line thinker. Identify a problem, gather the facts as they exist, apply reason and intellect to gather additional facts, and eventually you will arrive at a solution. I was not into off-track thinking, not into conspiracy theories, not into science fiction, not into fantasy, and not comfortable with creative endeavors. Just give me the facts. So early on, I clearly remember a conversation with my dad when I was 6 years old. And actually, it was not so much a conversation as it was an edict from him to me. Stop talking about Santa in front of your sister. And I was already in the business of myth busting, and my sister, who was 2 years younger, was not yet ready to deal with that. So my dad sort of laid down the law. And even at that early age, I was into facts and reason and not really thinking much about the negative impact that they could have potentially on someone else. When I started at Purdue, you had to declare a major as a freshman. I don't know if you still have to do that, but back then you did, and I chose math. I had taken 4.5 years of math in high school, and it was my thing. You have formulas, you plug in numbers, you arrive at a solution. What could be easier? That's the way my mind tended to work. Well, I made it through 2 semesters of advanced calculus, but I surrendered in my 3rd calculus class. In hindsight, it was not so much because I could not manipulate the numbers, but because I lacked creativity and imagination, which I now see as important qualities for any higher level mathematician. This would seem to be supported by the highest of the higher level mathematicians, Albert Einstein, who wrote, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science." So now I've come to believe that the shortest distance between problem and solution is not always a straight line, and that the 5th source and the 1st source, which we dealt with a few weeks ago, direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder, are not contradictory, but rather complementary, as long as we heed the warning to be vigilant against the idolatries of the mind and spirit. Come, let us worship together as we further examine our 5th source.
I'm a little rusty. Adrian's been doing such a wonderful job. So yes, come forward. Young folks, young at heart, people who just feel like sitting on the floor for no reason, come on forward. So today, I appreciate that. Here, you sit right there, and then I'll call you in a second, okay? I like that energy. Okay? It's good. It's good. So today we're talking a little bit about science. How many of you have some science in your life, in school, or maybe a little like toy at home that your dad is a computer scientist? Thank you. And so we'll call you about some tech issues. And yes, Darian? You did a volcano.
The egg volcano, and I made a volcano too.
Excellent. Well, I think this is excellent. There's so much scientists here. Do you want to help me open this wonder box here real quick?
Yeah.
So you just kind of yeah, open that there. Thank you. And I'll take it from here. Why don't you go sit down back by your sister, okay? Yeah, I know. What is that? Okay, why don't you go sit down right there? Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. First, there's a little thing that says, look underneath the shawl. Okay. Oh my gosh, a little bathtub. How sweet. No, it's not a bathtub, but it is a thing of water. And today, what? Let's see what it says. Sink or float. Yeah, will it stay at the top or will it go down? I wonder if some of you want to do a little quiz. We did a quiz last week. I think it worked out all right. Yeah, you want to do it again? Okay. So I'm going to call on you one at a time. So I'm going to ask you if something's going to sink or float. Let's actually first go to our textbook here. Adrian gave me this and I said, okay, well, so I guess like hot air, a bunch of hot air. So I would sink to the bottom. There you see that on the left there. And then there's something like HE, is that helium? That must be helium, that goes up. Air goes down, and then CO2 is also a little heavier. Okay, well, we don't have any of those things in here, but I'm gonna call on one of you and you're gonna tell me if you think it's going to sink or float. Sounds like a game show on CBS, 2 o'clock. Okay, what do you think about this? One person, raise your hand. Yeah, what do you think?
I think it's gonna sink because it's a rock.
It's a rock. Okay, let's see what happens, okay? Okay, good job, good job. All right, what about this one? This one, what do you think about this one? You think it's gonna float? This is my golf ball. I've had a hole in 100 with this one. So let's see if this sinks or floats, okay? Oh, it sunk as well. Okay. Oh my God, this one's really heavy. Okay, what do you think about this one? So you think it's gonna sink? You think it's gonna sink? Okay, let's see. What do you think? You think it's gonna sink? I got you. Okay. All right. What about this ruler? Sink, you think? Oh, okay. Let's see what happens. It's floating. Oh, there it goes. Okay. That wasn't fair. Okay, what about this thing? This little breakfast I had. Yeah, you think float? Okay. It's a boat. Okay, excellent. Ah. What'd you say? Don't push it down this time. Okay, well, what if, geez, tough students. All right, what about if we add some of our common sense? What do you think? Do you think we could add a couple common sense here? Do you think how many do you think it will take to drown our little boat here? What do you think? A bunch? You think too many? Okay. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. 6. I know it's a little hard to see. 7, 8, 9, 10. Wow, a whole dime. All right. Well, that one didn't work. All right. Okay. What about this pencil? What do you think about the pencil? It's gonna float? Oh, and the old toothbrush, paintbrush. What do you think about this one? There you go. Okay, what about this this little light, little candle? What do you think? Float? Sink? Oh, Lewis is saying sink. Let's see. Whoa, this little light of mine. All right, we got a couple more. Here we got a couple more. What about one of these things? Oh, all right. What about a little paper clip? Float? There it goes. What about a little Sharpie marker? Sink. All right, here we go. Ooh. And a little stick stir. Wow, nice. Okay, I got a couple more things, and then we'll talk about why this was a great use of our time today. So, this is our singing bowl. It is very heavy. Louis, stand up here. Stand up. Stand up. How heavy is this? Is this pretty heavy? Really heavy. Yeah. Okay. And Louis is strong. What do you think? Think it's going to go straight down? Well, we'll find out. Whoa, that is close. All right. So it did not sink. It's good. Hopefully it doesn't rust either. Let's see. All right, one more. Let's see if our compost bucket sinks. What do you think? Float? Okay, that was easy. You guys have gotten so smart already. So it did float. All right, so what I'm gonna wrap up in a moral conclusion here is that sometimes science can actually be kind of fun. Sometimes things are exactly as we think they might be, and sometimes they actually surprise us a little bit. Sometimes we can see things that look like the same kind of thing, like my lucky golf ball and our shared earth, but they can have different density. You have some friends who are, no, we have different kinds of relationships in our lives. And hopefully, whatever we do, we can stay on the surface together and, extending the imagery a little bit too far here. So I am excited for what you're about to go and do in your classrooms. And I'm really excited to see you all enjoy the wonderful nature after the service. So we're going to sing our
The first reading this morning is an excerpt from the 5 Points of the New Theology by James Freeman Clarke, published in 1885. The fifth point of doctrine in the New Theology will, as I believe, be the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. Progress is the outward heaven, corresponding to the inward heaven of character. The hope of progress is one of the chief motives to action. The Apostle Paul tells us that one of the things which abide is hope. If hope abides, there is always something to look forward to, some higher attainment, some larger usefulness, some nearer communion with God. And this accords with all we see and know, with the long processes of geologic development by which the earth became fitted to be the home of man, with the slow ascent of organized beings from humbler to fuller life, with the progress of society from age to age, with the gradual diffusion of knowledge, advancement of civilization, growth of free institutions, and ever higher conceptions of God and of religious truth. The one fact which is written on nature and human life is the fact of progress, and this must be accepted as the purpose of the Creator.
Our second reading is written by Michael Werner, and it's called Devotion to Humanity. For all the talk about reason and science, humanism is really about a passionate love affair. It is a love affair with life, not a mythical hereafter. Humanism is a love affair with a progressive vision of civilization in which each of us can add to our growing library of wisdom, our evolving knowledge of what there is and what is truly important. None of the great achievements in history would have been possible without a love of the adventure of learning and the adventure of creating a better life. Our great cultural achievements in science, art, music, literature, philosophy, history, psychology, and political thought all inform each other and have been born of that long humanist tradition. Humanism is a devotion to humanity and the biosphere that humanity is a part of. It is our passionate commitment to the best ideals that are supported by what experience, science, and civilization have taught us. Humanism is larger than any one of us. We have a duty to continue humanism's evolving tradition, which has inspired countless individuals to make the world better. At the same time, it motivates us to fill our lives with transcendent purpose for a meaningful, exuberant existence that makes life worth living. On this fifth Sunday, we mark our fifth week in a 6-week series on the sources of Unitarian Universalism. This fifth source relates to our use of reason and our appreciation for science and the benefits of a humanistic worldview can offer us as, well, humans. I must admit, though, this is a tough back-to-back week for me. Last Sunday was perhaps the hardest sermon. Of your worldview today. Perhaps it is what attracted you to this community, like a community like this one, where we can live in harmony with both science and mystery, as Steve shared. What could be difficult about that? Well, said plainly, I deeply love the wellspring and wisdom and perspective found within this source of Unitarian Universalism. And at the same time, I get a little nervous because of its rather carte blanche freedom to move throughout our Unitarian Universalist communities rather unchecked. Don't get me wrong, who doesn't love reason or appreciate science generally? Whether I understand how something works scientifically, I sure am glad scientists exist and have made major improvements to our world regarding some of the challenges we have faced throughout millennia, especially over these past few centuries. Vaccines, good. General relativity, complicated, but I think good. Cancer treatments, amazing. And one of my favorites, the slinky. They have all furthered amazing discoveries and have moved our world further, whether for adults or children, for all of us. The rigors of reason, the objective nature of the scientific method, and the demands of critical discourse ensure that we do not tumble headlong into conclusion prematurely, but rather check and double check to ensure we understand to the best of our abilities the implications of our conclusions. Having confidence in humanity as a result of our remarkable capacity to reason and engage science is a logical and worthy conclusion to draw. Indeed, perhaps there is no need for a theistic worldview when our dependence can be placed assuredly on one another, where together we can address the challenges of our day and face the rising future before us. It's not surprising then that Unitarians and Universalists have held humanity in such a high esteem for so long. Long gone from our religious tradition is any sort of Calvinistic worldview of the depraved humanity that ran and in some places still runs rampant throughout our society. No, our understanding of humanity is found in an affirmation of the general and inherent goodness found in all human beings. To be born good and have the capacity to extend goodness to others is a hallmark of our living tradition. In 1885, the Unitarian minister, the Reverend James Freeman Clark, aimed to articulate a theological worldview that presented a countercultural gut punch to the Calvinist teachings of the day. To counter John Calvin's narrow theology in his mind, Clark wrote a worldview in 5 points about what he called the new theology. This morning, Steve shared just an excerpt from that new theology, especially regarding the 5th point, which deals most directly with the question of human nature. Clark wrote, quote, "The 5th point of doctrine in this new theology will, as I believe, be the continuity of human development in all worlds, or the progress of mankind onward and upward forever." We need not look past this first sentence to see a phrase that would come to hold tremendous power in the trajectory of not only Unitarian Universalism in the next century, but in society broadly, especially the scientific community, onward and upward forever. This phrase, which is a belief in the linear, ever-progressing nature of humanity, has a nice ring to it. However, there are instances in which this belief has been taken to the extreme and led to harmful conclusions. My colleague, the Reverend Fred Muir, who served the UU Church of Annapolis, Maryland for 34 years, 34, wow, has spent much of his retirement researching and writing on topics of interest, one of which is what he has learned as the outsized role Unitarians played in the rise of eugenics in the United States. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute, eugenics is an immoral and pseudoscientific theory that claims it is possible to perfect people and groups through genetics and the scientific laws of inheritance. While the belief in eugenics has become quite marginal in the 21st century, it was once all the craze, including in Nazi Germany, and the lingering effects can still be felt today. At the turn of the 20th century, though, the conversations around eugenics reached across this country, from New York, even to here to Indiana and to California. In a paper Reverend Muir recently published, which was titled "Seduced by the Sound of Silence," what a title, Unitarian Universalism in the Eugenics Era, Muir tells the story of David Starr Jordan. Are any of you familiar with this name, David Starr Jordan? I didn't before reading Muir's paper, but David Starr Jordan received his middle name in honor of Thomas Starr King, who was an exceptional Unitarian minister and preacher in the 1800s out in California. Thomas Starr King is the namesake of one of the 2 Unitarian Universalist seminary, which is named Starr King School for the Ministry, which is in the San Francisco area. I digress. The other Starr, David Starr Jordan, had a more sordid past. You see, while Jordan didn't attend Unitarian congregations much as an adult, he was deeply influenced by our tradition. His academic study was ichthyology, which I had to look up. Anyone? The study of fish. Well, Jordan's research led him down a deep spiral into this Darwinian desire to understand and order and even further control the natural world. He also wrote several books on eugenics, including The Blood of the Nation, a study of the decay of races through the survival of the unfit. Well, my father-in-law, the Reverend Roger Birchhausen, as many of you know him, recently gave a sermon in Minnesota in which he spoke to these themes and the popularity of Jordan's writings at the time, saying, quote, "This book, along with several other books that gave precious cover to eugenics as a serious and constructive field of scientific study, was published by Beacon Press. Beacon Press is the denominational publishing house of Unitarian Universalism. In fact, as Roger goes on to say, Jordan had more books published by Beacon Press, 19, than any other author ever. The Nazis used Jordan's and other Beacon Press books as justification for justification for genocide. Neo-Nazi organization in the United States continued to use these books, like one in 2019 that made available a condensed version of The Blood of the Nation. The intersecting of eugenics with our Unitarian Universalist tradition deserves consideration and self-reflection. Is there a thread to be drawn between James Freeman Clarke's utterance of onward and upward forever and David Starr Jordan's scientific racism? Perhaps, but a more pressing question for me, a more pressing question comes to mind. What are the limits or extremes of science that we should be mindful of in our pursuits of truth, meaning, and progress as a society? Or said differently, how do we ensure that we do not become susceptible to, as the fifth source suggests, idolatries of the mind and the spirit? That is such an important end to that fifth source, isn't it? A little tack on there. The fifth source reads in its entirety, humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. I think it's not dissimilar to the way we sort of shorthand our fourth Unitarian Universalist principle, which is to promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We sort of shorthand it to, oh, UUs can sort of believe whatever they want. Have you heard that before, or perhaps said it? We have no common creed. We are free to believe whatever we want. The emphasis of freedom over responsibility, rather than a strong balance between the two, makes a world of difference. The same could be true for the fifth source, that it really boils down to something like reason and science are super cool, and where there is reason, there is a way, or with science, all things are possible. Those very well may be bumper stickers, I don't know. We know, though, that without ethics, without temperance, our scientific pursuits, even our best intentions, can have unintended consequences. Think the development of nuclear weapons, we heard Einstein earlier, or social media platforms that can sow disinformation and social unrest, or there are those who would intentionally misuse science, like those who carried out the Tuskegee experiments, those who ran or turned a blind eye to the abusive state-run mental asylums in the early 1900s, or conversion therapy in the last few decades, or the myriad of policies or judicial decisions that proclaim what is right or wrong, permitted or forbidden regarding one's personal healthcare decisions. All of this is to say, there is so much that is amazing about the fifth source, and that through a rigorous responsibility and attention and care we can place into it, we can indeed move our world forward. The shift then comes not from the sense that we are moving as individuals onward and upward forever, but that we can increasingly look to what will help all of society move forward with mutual aid, with radical compassion and collective liberation before us on the horizon. How can science aid in those pursuits? Rejecting the impulse to play God or to genetically alter an individual, we are asked to consider how we can transform community ever more towards the principles found within the very first humanist manifesto published in 1933. I've spoken about the Humanist Manifesto in 1933 before, but we've had a pandemic since then, and I've had 2 kids, and my memory is shot. So as a reminder, it offered 15 statements about a humanistic worldview, and the final one, it always seems to be the final one we bring up, sums up the others, which is, quote, "We assert that humanism will affirm life rather than deny it, seek to elicit the possibilities of life, not flee from them, and endeavor to establish the conditions of a satisfactory life for all, not merely for the few. And by this positive morale and intention, humanism will be guided. And from this perspective and alignment, the techniques or the teachings and efforts of humanism will flow." 15 of the 34 signers, 15 of the 34 signers of the Humanist Manifesto were Unitarians, including William Bragg, the chief writer and secretary of the Western Unitarian Conference, of which we would have been a part at the time. And by the way, it was also signed by the Reverend Frank S.C. Wicks, who served as the minister of All Souls Unitarian Church in Indianapolis. The assertions made in this manifesto to affirm life rather than deny it, to seek the satisfactory life for all, not merely for the few, is a major step forward than just a few decades after David Starr Jordan became a household name for many who lifted up the potential, the endless potential of science to save us all. I don't have time to go into it today, but just as a quick conclusion on Jordan, you see, he became the first president of Stanford University. Yes, that's Stanford University, and served in that position for over 2 decades. Only now has Stanford begun to reconcile this complicated legacy of Jordan with the school's early years. And for those of you who are still scratching your head, as if you recall that name from somewhere prior to going to Stanford, David Starr Jordan served as the 7th president of Indiana University. Yes, that Indiana University. The Jordan River, which flows through campus, is named in his honor, an homage to his study of fish, which after today's sermon may give you pause next time you walk along its banks. Yet this is the messiness of life, of the beauty of science and the potential for it to undermine itself, of the beauty of humans who have the potential to undermine ourselves. Perhaps the Humanist Manifesto will help us stay on the right path, appreciating the teachings that balance us in our care for both the individual mind and the collective community, for the pursuit of knowledge and an ethic of caring for all. As Michael Werner writes, simply stated, humanism is a devotion to humanity. Humanism is a devotion to humanity. So may we remain devoted to one another. May we hold one another in these uncertain and vulnerable days of our lives, and in our devotion, may humanity, all of humanity together, find strength and courage to carry onward, onward, onward still. May it be so, and amen.